My name is Martin Richards and I am both a teacher and a coach. I'd like to share what I believe coaching has to offer in the world of teaching. Well, first of all, let me say that I understand your teaching situation about that much. I worked as a teacher for many years, as recently as 2012. But of course it was another school, with another class, and probably with another subject. But I do have a little understanding. And that allows me to make a connection between myself as a coach and you as in your role as a teacher. After my teaching degree, I taught for many years in private schools, public schools, independent schools, all kinds of different ways of teaching, both children and adults. After my teaching degree and 3 decades of teaching, I retrained as a coach. Of course, many people call themselves coach, so let me make a difference here. I am a trained coach, and I've chosen the best training company. Of course, everyone does, but the name of the best one is the Coaches Training Institute, and I am a coactive coach. And what that means is that I, as a coach, focus on you rather than any issue or problem you may bring to the coaching session. There are coaches who do other things, but as a coactive coach, 80% of my time and energy is on exploring who you are, what you are feeling in the moment, and what it is you desire to achieve. And then we get down to the strategies that might be useful. During the coach training, I became interested in how the work of a coach could impact the work of a teacher, and did some research by visiting schools, 5 in all, where I gave a short presentation of what coaching is and listened to how teachers connected to that. I was really surprised just how much of the coaching strategies, the coaching skills, were already present in many of those schools, many of those classrooms. I would say that a really good teacher is actually coaching. And what is coaching? And what are the skills that teachers recognize in the coaching skills palette? Well, fairly clearly, the skill of listening is common to both professions. The skill of asking questions and listening to the answers, keeping the conversation going by asking the right kind of questions, i.e. open questions. Then we have planning and accountability, we have learning about yourself, we have moving towards action. These are all common to both teaching and coaching. So it was a great match. I came to the conclusion that more could be done, even though really good teachers do in fact coach, they don't coach very much. One of the issues was time. Nobody has time to do the kind of interaction between teacher and student that they would like to. So my next mission was to find a way of coaching that was directly connected to a teacher's world. We looked at coaching in the staff room, where 2 teachers would support each other, or a group of teachers would work together to improve their teaching using coaching skills. We looked at how an individual teacher could interact with the whole class in a coach-like way. And indeed, coach. And it depended a little on the teacher. My experience was from going to the classroom as a coach and coaching an individual in front of the whole class. There weren't many teachers who were prepared to take that kind of risk because they weren't trained. You never know in a coaching session quite what's going to come out and where it's going to go. And the training that I had from the Coaches Training Institute gave me the confidence to stand in that unknowing and little chaotic conversations in full confidence that it's going somewhere, it's having an effect. The mood in the room when I was coaching an individual was a great curiosity and respect for the bravery of the student who came up to be coached. But also, even though I was coaching the student on his or her subjects, topics I mean, not subjects, every single student felt that they had progressed in a significant way in their topics and subjects. In my demonstrations of coaching to a class, I was presented to the class as a coach rather than a teacher. The teacher was in the room and I was going to give a talk and a demonstration of coaching. And to do that, I first created a relationship with the students, and then about a third of the way in through my hour with them, I brought a student up on stage and they would have some topic around whatever. And we would focus on that topic for 10 or 15 minutes, looking at who that student was, and towards the end, what could they do differently? The interesting thing was that even though only one student was being coached, every single student in the room reported that they felt that they had moved significantly in their own hands up. Who feels they've moved ahead significantly in their own topics by listening to the coaching that was up front here today? That surprised me. I didn't expect the knock-on effect to be so large. I think it's because these young men and women who were in their early teens were ready for the kind of coaching conversation that I was able to offer as a coach. Now, the teacher was there. I haven't yet experienced teachers going into that kind of depth. But I have seen, though, the teachers who, using a script, like a visualization script, or, well, using a coaching tool, have been able to guide the students in their own thinking where the students are silent in their responses. Even though the teacher's not contributing any advice or any supporting strategies or any encouragement to do better, just because that kind of conversation has taken place, the students feel they got better. Another project that I've been involved in lasted 2 years and offered teachers observation and reflective coaching sessions. The way this was set up was that with a demonstration and a presentation of what coaching was on offer, teachers volunteered to try it out. They had perhaps no direct experience of coaching before this, so they were curious about what it could offer. The setup was an initial conversation to build trust between the teacher and the coach, a planning session which was going to focus on the observation that's coming up, a classroom observation, where the teacher decided what was going to be observed. This was key. The teacher decides what the coach will observe. Because as a coach, especially if you've been a teacher, you see a lot of things going on in the classroom, but you don't observe them. That means you don't take note of them. The teacher decides in advance what the coach will observe and how the coach will take note, whether they make a recording, take photographs, draw pictures, or diagrams, or write down the dialogue, or whatever it is that seems to be a good tool for capturing the observation. Then the observation would take place. The coach might have focus on the first part of the lesson, or the last part of the lesson, and they may come and go during and then there will be a reflective coaching as soon after the lesson as possible. And in that, it's the teacher who determines what gets talked about. It's the teacher's immediate reflections on their own lesson, what it is they felt was going on, what they noticed, what they liked, what they didn't like, what they could do better. And sometimes the notes taken by the coach weren't used because they weren't necessary. And sometimes they get fitted into the conversation. The teacher asks for some feedback, and then the coach can use these notes. After that, the teacher decides on one or two things that he or she is going to do differently. And that might be an element in the observation that comes up. The things that the teacher chooses to modify and change in coming lessons might be something that's included in the observation. It's up to the teacher. Now, some examples just to make it more concrete. One teacher wanted to know how his communication was with the students. You know, what's my communication like? And the initial conversation where the relationship between the coach and the teacher had been established, where you're into the planning, the question was, how do I know? How does the observer know what the relationship is? What are the signs? And by making a list of the sort of things that the observer was to keep their eyes open for, creates the opportunity of seeing that more, both for the teacher and the observer. In this particular case that I'm thinking of, the teacher talked about distance between themselves and their students. We talked about body language, we talked about smiles and communication, we talked about all the things that are significant around how am I communicating with my students. And we agreed that I could take photographs so long as they were only used in the feedback and then deleted straight away. We didn't ask the students, although we could have. Maybe we should have. I took 4 photographs. 3 were the teacher in rapport with the students. It was beautiful to see. And the 4th one, I just took them one after the other, so it just happened to be on the roll. And the teacher had his arm around the student, his right arm around the student's right shoulder, standing on the left of the student. Get the geography there? The student's head was right under the teacher's armpit. Something the teacher wasn't aware of until he saw the photograph and decided that he would change his behavior, that his right hand would be on the student's left shoulder when they were standing on the left. Because he likes to touch his students, just placing a hand on the shoulder. It was a wake-up call. One teacher asked me to look at how she was moving around the classroom. She had some idea that she wanted to visit every student at least once during the lesson. Reasonable request. And the way I was to take notes was to draw like a path. Where is the teacher every minute or so? And I did a map of the room, and for a period of time noted where the teacher was standing and moving. And that became part of the feedback. I just said, would you want to see the map, the drawing now? Gave it to the teacher, and she drew her own conclusions from the picture. There was a whole corner of the room which she never visited during the whole lesson. And she kind of suspected that about herself. She kind of had that feeling that she was missing something. And here it was, black and white. No need for me to point anything out. It was already very pointed. So the coaching questions was around, what do you notice? How do you feel about what you're noticing? What does it mean to you? What are you learning from this? And the teacher came to their own conclusion about what they would do differently, how they would deliberately move around the classroom. She used 4 yellow post-its pinned to the 4 corners of the wall. and she would just make a mark on it every time she went there. This is without me observing. It's her way of observing herself. And of course, by looking at these 4 bits of paper, she could see, well, I never got to that corner. Again, I will deliberately go there next time, creating her own strategy. And the benefits for the students, of course, was they got to speak and talk with their teacher close at hand. The next level, and there are many levels to this, and I'm really surprised just how much there is that can be done. The next level is that teachers are observing each other. Sometimes there's an older, younger, or let's say more experienced, less experienced teacher who goes in to observe. Sometimes it's the head that goes in to observe. And what we teach is to redesign, to realign so that the power difference is as small as possible, that you stand on a common ground. So teacher A, who's going to be the observer, needs to know what teacher B wants to have observed. And there must be some agreement about what gets said and what doesn't get said, what gets observed, what doesn't get observed, what gets written down and what doesn't get written down, and what gets said and doesn't get said, both in the meeting and outside. The confidentiality and confidence in your partner, the observer, has been the key. The rest of its mechanics, the how to observe, what to observe, whether to record or make a video, these are quite superficial compared to the relationship building. But you can imagine if you've got 20 teachers in a school and they're observing each other in pairs, where the relationship is the most important, the benefits of growing the relationships far outweigh any technical competence increase in the classroom. And of course, it supports the technical competence in the classroom. It supports the relationship in the staff room where, for example, when I was in Malmö during the early days, when I was still doing the research, the situation I found myself in was that I was visiting the school and I got to hear, I was in the staff room, and I heard 2 teachers having a conversation, and it went something like this. Teacher A said, "I'm having a really bad day." And teacher B said, "So what? I'm having a worse day." Humorous in an outsider perspective, but they were trying to outdo each other in how bad their lives were as teachers. Now that energy I find attractive. I kind of stuck my neck out and said, "What are you guys doing?" And they were kind of caught because, I was a visitor and they were misbehaving. They weren't behaving in the professional way that they can. So when I asked them what are they doing, they got a little defensive. And after a few moments of explanation, we got into a conversation where I facilitated the new way of helping each other. A third teacher, the one that I was visiting, came into the conversation and helped me facilitate this. What we landed in was, we need to have a time with each other where we just pour out all of our troubles and woes, and the other does not respond with anything more than listening ears. So simple. And yet so hard to do, because we want to help each other, or we want to get seen for how difficult our lives are. So they would trade. You listen to me without response, then I'll listen to you without response. And then we talk about what do we want to do with the information. Very professional. So in those early days, my conclusion was that we need to be coach-like towards each other as teachers so that we can raise our game for our students. So, no surprise that 10 years later I find that I'm training teachers in the art of listening to each other, the art of asking questions, and the art of creating an empowered relationship. A word that I borrowed from the Coaches Training Institute. Creating an empowered relationship that goes beyond being just colleagues in a school. I hope something of the things that I've mentioned here will attract you. Either that you have a coach come to you and observe you, have a coach come to your class and facilitate a deeper conversation. That you learn some basic coaching tools that you can use with your students immediately, and that you begin to build coach-like relationships, empowered relationships with your colleagues. Of course, just to add one more cherry on top, I've been talking about teachers all the time, but it applies to head teachers too. Head teacher-teacher relationship, that can be an empowered relationship too. When a head teacher observes a teacher, that can be done on an even keel, so long as the teacher sets the agenda. Head teachers who work together, you can also have empowered relationships where you speak to each other in a listening way. And head teachers can also create empowered relationships where you know that you can rely on your partner listening to you without trying to fix you, without trying to solve the problem, and helping you understand what it is that's driving you and what it is you want and how you can get it. Head teachers should be coaches. For me, an obvious thing. Of course you should be. And some of you already are. And I'm Martin Richards. I coach teachers and head teachers. In fact, I coach the entire system. My aim is to evolve the education system through coaching.